How do the Japanese keep their homes completely free from humidity and mold? Meanwhile, you've tried everything, and your house is still damp and the mold keeps creeping back in. You can stop the mold growing in your home for good if you apply the same methods Japanese families have been using for over 1,000 years, and they work just as well in a 3-bedroom house in Ohio as they do in a small apartment in Tokyo. We're talking about a simple kitchen ingredient that kills mold on contact, a small piece of charcoal that pulls moisture out of the air for 3 years straight, and a 15-minute morning habit that resets the air in your entire home. I'm going to show you how to dry out your house and stop the mold for under $30 with no expensive equipment and no monthly dehumidifier bill. So get comfortable and let's get into it. The first thing the Japanese tackle is the source of most household mold, the walls themselves. Their solution is white Limewash, which you can pick up at any hardware store for a few bucks. In Japan, they call it shikoi, and they've been coating their homes, temples, and castles with it for over 1,000 years, but for our purposes, it's the same hydrated lime that American farmers and bricklayers have been using forever. It's effective because brushing the walls with a mixture of lime and water leaves a surface with a pH of around 12, which is far above the level mold needs to survive. So any spore that lands there has no chance of taking hold and growing into a colony. On top of that, lime is naturally porous, which means the wall actually breathes with the room, pulling moisture out of the air when things get damp and releasing it back when the air dries out. So your room ends up regulating its own humidity without you ever plugging anything in. I mixed up a batch of Limewash and brushed it onto the worst corner of my basement last fall, and the musty smell that had been hanging around for 2 years was gone within 4 days. The whole project cost me about $3 compared to the $180 I'd already wasted on dehumidifiers that just sat there humming and collecting water all night. Your grandmother probably kept an open box of baking soda in the back of the fridge and the bottom of the closet for the same reason. It absorbs moisture and odor on its own, and it earns its place in your mold fighting toolkit. A solid combo for any spot mold has already taken hold is to spray the area down with white vinegar. Let it sit and dry, then dust it with baking soda before you brush on the Limewash. And between the 3 of them, you've handled the existing spores, the lingering moisture, and the long-term prevention all in one afternoon. If the idea of mixing your own Limewash sounds like more of a project than you want to take on, the good news is that there's now a ready-made shikoi paint sold in the US that runs about $40 a gallon. It goes on with a regular roller just like any wall paint and gives you the same antifungal effect baked right into the finish. For anyone who'd rather keep it simple and cheap, you can walk into any farm supply store and grab a bag of hydrated lime for under $10, which is enough to coat a whole basement or garage with plenty left over for next year. Mix the lime with water until it's the consistency of thick paint. Stir in a small splash of salt to help the finish harden as it dries, and brush it onto your walls in 2 thin coats rather than 1 heavy one, because the thinner coats bond better and dry without cracking. People have been protecting their walls this exact way since the Roman Empire, and it still works. Now before we continue, I want you to know about a book I wrote that gathers all of the money-saving methods that Japanese have used for centuries to keep their land, home, and family in good shape. It is at thejapanesemethod.com. Scan the QR code or click the link below to get your copy. If you want it, it is there. This brings us to the next piece of the puzzle. The latex paint you have on your wall traps moisture against drywall. This means that humidity in the house gets stuck in the gap between the latex and the drywall, and the colonies you eventually see on the surface actually started growing behind the paint long before they showed up. This is exactly why the Limewash we covered earlier works so much better. Because instead of sealing moisture in, it lets the wall breathe it out. Japanese builders have understood this for centuries, which is why traditional homes are built almost entirely from materials that breathe. The most famous example is the tatami floor, woven from a rush grass called igusa, with tiny sponge-like cells inside each strand that absorb and release water all day. A single standard mat holds about 16 ounces of moisture before it's saturated, so the floor itself pulls roughly a half liter of water out of the air and gives it back when things dry out. Full tatami isn't really practical for most American homes because the mats are expensive, need specific care, and will mold themselves if you lay them over carpet or seal them in a basement. The workaround is unit tatami panels on Amazon for around $80, and even a single panel in a bedroom or under a mattress does real work by breaking up the dead air zone where moisture pools overnight. If tatami feels like too much, the principle still translates anywhere. Swap synthetic rugs for wool, polyester curtains for cotton, laminate furniture for solid wood, because every breathable surface in the room contributes. The Japanese rule of thumb is that every surface should be doing a little humidity work rather than blocking airflow. That covers walls and floors, but the rooms people forget about are closets, pantries, and that weird corner that always smells slightly off, which is where the next Japanese trick comes in, and it happens to be made of charcoal. The Japanese version is called binchotan, or white charcoal, made by slowly burning ubame oak in covered kilns at around 1000 degrees Celsius, and then smothering the embers in ash and earth. The result is a stick of charcoal so dense that two pieces ring like metal when you tap them together. And inside that hardness is a honeycomb of microscopic pores that grabs water molecules straight out of the air. Japanese households have been hanging binchotan in closets and drawers for over 400 years, basically the same use case as the silica gel packets in vitamin bottles, except a single stick keeps working for up to 3 years. The maintenance is almost laughable because when the charcoal feels heavy or stops absorbing, you set it outside in direct sunlight for a few hours and the sun bakes the moisture back out. There's also a long documented practice of burying charcoal under the floors of houses and temples, and the research shows a charcoal layer reduces humidity in the room above by about 15% while suppressing mold and termite activity. Some of the oldest wooden temples still standing in Japan have the original charcoal beds from over 1,000 years ago. For an American home, you don't need to tear up your floors because a bag of binchotan from Amazon runs about $25, and a few sticks in each closet, under the bathroom sinks, and in a couple of basement corners will handle most of it. The calcium chloride dehumidifier bags at the hardware store run $12 each, work once, and go in the trash, so the math on something that lasts 3 years is pretty obvious. I recommend boiling the sticks for about 10 minutes before first use to clean off any ash, let them air dry, and try to use sticks the size of your hand or bigger. The pebble-sized bits sold for water filtration also work, but you need more of them, and for a typical closet, one solid stick or about half a pound of bits is plenty. If real binchotan is more than you want to spend, regular hardwood lump charcoal from the grocery store has the same porous carbon structure. Doesn't last as long and is messier, but stuffed into an old cotton sock and hung in a damp space. It works on the same principle. Activated charcoal from a pet store, the kind sold for aquarium filters, is another cheap option. Charcoal handles the small enclosed spaces, but it doesn't do much for the actual living rooms and bathrooms, which is where the next Japanese material comes in. Walk into a traditional Japanese bathroom and you'll often see a wooden tub made of hinoki, which is Japanese cypress and the same wood used to build the oldest standing wooden building in the world, a temple put up in the year 607 that's still there today. What makes hinoki special is a compound called hinokitiol, which is naturally antifungal and antibacterial, and the effect is measurable enough that a controlled study at OSC City Hall compared 2 identical rooms with and without hinoki, and found bacterial colonies showed up in the control room by day 3 but didn't appear in the hinoki room until day 13, with fungal growth significantly lower as well. The wood does the work just by being in the room. In America, you can pick up a hinoki cutting board for around $50, and bath stools and accessories run a bit more. Even one hinoki object in a damp room contributes. And some people install hinoki bath panels or shower benches because the wood resists mold even in standing humidity, which is remarkable when you consider most woods would rot in those conditions. If hinoki is out of budget, Western red cedar contains similar compounds and works the same way, and cedar closet liners at Home Depot run under $100 for a small closet. The point isn't really expensive Japanese wood, it's recognizing that the material itself is part of the dehumidifier. That covers materials, but it leaves the water sitting on your bathroom floor every time someone showers, which is the next thing the Japanese have figured out beautifully. Step out of a shower in Japan, and you might step onto a slab of stone that pulls the water off your feet within seconds, called a diatomaceous earth bath mat or keisodo, made from fossilized algae compressed into a hard tile. The surface is full of microscopic pores, and when wet feet touch the stone, capillary action drags the water in faster than any cotton towel could manage. The mat dries itself within minutes, so there's no laundry and no mildew smell. These started as a niche Japanese product but exploded worldwide a few years back, and Amazon sells them for $25. Once you've used one for a week, you'll wonder how you ever put up with cotton mats. And the same material gets used for coasters and spoon rests because anywhere moisture collects, it wicks the water away. It's actually the same stuff sold at garden stores as a pest powder, just compressed into solid form. That handles the floor, but the air above it is the next problem, and this is where Japanese homes do something American builders forgot how to do, which is cross ventilation. Walk through any traditional Japanese house and you'll notice windows sit directly across from each other on opposite walls, which isn't a stylistic choice but deliberate engineering, because when a breeze comes through one side, it has nowhere to go except straight out the other, and the whole room exchanges its air in minutes. Even modern Japanese apartments are laid out this way when possible, and people open windows on opposite ends of the home for 10 to 15 minutes every day, even in winter, because stale indoor air holds more moisture than cold outdoor air ever will. The Japanese also build higher windows called rame, set near the ceiling, because hot, humid air rises, and an exit point up high lets the worst of it leave naturally. American homes stick windows at eye level, which traps the most humid air in the upper third of the room where nobody can get at it. You don't need to remodel anything to use this. Find 2 windows on opposite ends of your home and open them at the same time for 15 minutes a day, with the bathroom fan running and interior doors propped open, and the pressure differential does the rest. Costs nothing, works anywhere, and it's probably the single highest value habit on this list. The Japanese have a name for the morning ritual, kanki, which roughly translates to air exchange, and hotels do it, schools do it, and old grandmothers do it before breakfast. The thinking is that stale indoor air, however clean it looks, carries yesterday's moisture from cooking, breathing, and bathing, so you swap it for fresh outdoor air even when that air is colder, because the moisture content matters more than the temperature. A friend of mine sealed his Colorado house up tight for winter heating efficiency a few years back, and by year 2 he had mold blooming in 3 rooms and spent close to $6,000 on remediation. The Japanese would have laughed at the situation because what we accidentally built were beautifully airtight petri dishes that we then called energy efficient. There's also something worth noticing about what Japanese homes don't have, which is furniture pushed flat against walls, since there's almost always a few centimeters of gap between any large piece and the wall behind it. Pull your couch a few inches off the wall, crack your closet doors at night, and run a small fan in any room that feels stuffy. One more note on ventilation. Japanese bathrooms typically have a dedicated 24-hour exhaust fan that runs constantly rather than only during a shower, while American homes have a single fan the homeowner forgets to turn on. Run yours for at least 30 minutes after every shower, and if it's more than 5 years old, replace it, because new ones cost about $40 and move twice the air. All of this works most of the year, but airflow has limits when the outside air is as wet as the inside, which brings us to the most challenging season, and the Japanese have a specific playbook for it. When the rainy season hits, Japan shifts into a different mode, called tsuyu or the plum rain, lasting about 6 weeks every June and July, with humidity averaging 75 to 90%. This is when mold gets dangerous if you're not paying attention, and the Japanese response is built around the futon. Every morning during tsuyu, families fold up their futons and hang them over the balcony railing in direct sunlight, because UV light kills mold spores, kills dust mites, and bakes out the previous night's moisture, with 2 hours in the sun resetting the whole thing. A single night of sleep transfers about a cup of water from your body into the bedding, and if that moisture never dries back out, the underside ends up wet enough to grow mold within a week and seriously moldy within a month. You probably don't sleep on a futon, but you do sleep on a mattress, and the same principle translates. Pull the sheets off once a week, open the windows, and let the bed breathe. Once a month during summer, lean the mattress against a wall and run a fan past it for an hour. If you have a sunny window or balcony, throw pillows and bedding into direct light for a couple of hours when you can, because UV exposure does in about 90 minutes what a clothes dryer can't do at all, which is killing the dust mites and mold spores that will build up between washes. Japanese balconies in summer are wall-to-wall futons hanging in the sun, and it looks strange the first time you see it until you realize they figured it out, something the rest of the world never bothered with. The same logic applies to closets, where the Japanese leave the doors cracked open during humid months and tuck moisture-absorbing sheets called Joshitsu Shito into the bottom of every drawer. The American equivalents are sold as Damp Rid or Eva Dry for around $10 a unit, and they pull moisture out of enclosed spaces around the clock. The bigger lesson from Tsuyu is that you don't wait for mold to show up. You attack the conditions first, every day, with small 5-minute actions that prevent the problem before it starts. Japanese households also do a deeper cleaning ritual called osoji, which happens twice a year, once before Tsuyu starts in late spring and once before winter. The whole house gets pulled apart, with tatami going outside into the sun, wooden furniture wiped down with a damp cloth and dried, and closets emptied, vacuumed, and wiped down with diluted vinegar. The whole point is to attack any buildup of moisture or dust before the humid season arrives, because by the time you can see mold, the roots underneath are already established. You don't need to do a full osoji every spring. Just pick one room a month and give it the treatment, pulling everything out, wiping with vinegar, opening the windows, and vacuuming the corners you usually skip. 12 months later, your whole house has been reset, and you'll catch small problems before they turn into expensive ones. When mold does show up despite all this, the Japanese approach is worth knowing, because the standard American move is bleach, and bleach has a real limitation, which is that it only kills mold on the surface and leaves the roots underneath alive. You essentially gave it a haircut. White vinegar works differently because it kills around 82% of mold species and actually penetrates into porous surfaces like wood, drywall, and grout, destroying the root system as well as the visible part. Japanese households spray it on, walk away, and leave it without rinsing because the residue keeps working for weeks afterwards and prevents new spores from settling. For tougher cases, the move is borax, with 1 cup mixed into a gallon of hot water, scrubbed in, and again left without rinsing, because borax leaves behind a residue that mold can't regrow on, with the added benefit that it repels insects too. I used vinegar and borax together in my own basement last summer, and the whole project came in under $5, while a single bottle of commercial mold remover would have run close to $20, and the homemade combo worked better with the smell gone within 2 days. For walls you actually want to repaint, mix a tablespoon of baking soda into a cup of vinegar, scrub, then wipe down, because the baking soda neutralizes the acidity and leaves a clean surface paint will bond to. This is a hack you'll see in countless Japanese household guides. That handles existing mold, but the next thing is preventing it from coming back, which brings us to something Japanese builders have done for over 1,000 years that American builders gave up on, which is raising the floor. A traditional Japanese house sits about 50 centimeters, or roughly 20 inches off the ground, and the space underneath is called the yuka shita and is intentionally ventilated so air flows freely under the entire structure, which means soil moisture never reaches the wooden floor joists. Modern Japanese homes still do a version of this through a system called Jodo vent, installed in more than 5 million Japanese houses, that creates a continuous gap between the foundation and the wood frame. That same system has been ICC certified in the US since 2019, so it's available to American builders today. Most homeowners can't change their foundation, but the principle still applies, because about 60% of basement mold issues actually trace back to ground moisture rising into wood through capillary action. If you have a crawl space, check whether it's actually ventilated, and if you have a basement, check whether your wooden subfloor sits directly against damp concrete. A simple fix is to install a vapor barrier on the crawl space floor and add a couple of vents, and some homeowners add a small fan to keep air moving, with the whole setup running a couple $100 and saving thousands in future damage. The bigger lesson is that you don't fight ground moisture by sealing it in, you give it a path to leave. And the Japanese figured this out when their tools were hand saws and chisels. That covers the structure. And the last item on the list is so simple most people don't believe it works until they try it, which is plain salt. The same coarse rock salt sitting in your pantry is what Japanese households fill shallow wooden boxes and ceramic dishes with, then tuck into damp corners around the home, including closets, basements, and the awkward space under the stairs. Salt is hygroscopic, meaning it pulls water out of the air on contact, and a 5-pound box absorbs close to a quart of water over several weeks. You'll watch it happen because the crystals dissolve into brine that pools in the bottom of the container and once it's full, you dump it, dry the salt in the sun, and reuse it. What makes salt particularly powerful is the secondary effect, because even when mold spores land near the box, the high salt concentration prevents them from germinating. Salt has been used to preserve food for thousands of years for the same reason. The commercial calcium chloride dehumidifiers at the hardware store run on this same chemistry. They just charge about 20 times what a bag of rock salt costs. This works best in small enclosed spaces like pantries, storage closets, and RV cabinets, anywhere air sits still. And while it won't dehumidify a whole room, it'll keep a closet bone dry for about $5 a salt. Speaking of pantries, the Japanese take food storage seriously, and it ties back into humidity control, because a lot of American kitchen mold problems start with food that's quietly sweating in a closed cabinet. Vegetables release moisture constantly, so that onion in your pantry is slowly leaking water into the air around it. And the same goes for garlic, potatoes, and ginger. Japanese households store these in mesh bags hung from the ceiling or in open bamboo baskets where air circulates. Because piled into a closed drawer, they create a humid microclimate that grows mold on cabinet walls within weeks. The fix is easy. Pull root vegetables out of plastic bags. Store them in cotton produce bags or wire baskets or a wooden bowl on the counter. Hang the onions and garlic and keep potatoes in paper. Costs nothing and prevents a problem most people never diagnose. Dried foods get a different treatment, with Japanese pantries full of glass jars sealed with tight lids holding rice, beans, dried fish, and seaweed, and every jar gets checked once a year for seal integrity. The logic is simple because one failed lid lets in enough moisture to grow mold inside the jar, and once that happens, the spores spread to every container around it. A single bad seal can mold an entire shelf. Tea storage is another small detail worth borrowing because the Japanese keep tea in airtight tins with a small silica gel packet inside, and the silica handles whatever humidity sneaks in every time the lid comes off. The same trick works for coffee, spices, dried herbs, or chocolate, and a free silica packet from your last shoebox dropped into a sealed jar extends shelf life by months. Then there's the refrigerator, which fights its own humidity battle every time it cycles on and off, because cold surfaces inside condense water constantly. Modern fridges try to manage this with internal fans, but most quietly lose, which is why Japanese households keep a small bag of binchotan or a box of baking soda inside to absorb the ambient moisture and odors. Change the baking soda about every 3 months, and the charcoal you just sun dry and put back. A clean, dry fridge means food lasts longer, which means less rotting, which means fewer mold spores entering the air every time you open the door. In the end, the overall pattern is what matters. Modern American houses fight humidity once a year when something goes wrong. Japanese houses prevent it every single day in small ways. Most of these methods cost almost nothing, and they've worked for over 1,000 years. They'll keep working long after your fancy gadgets die out and the warranty runs out. Your grandmother probably knew half of them already. The rest just take a quiet morning to set up, so stop fighting your house and let it breathe. And if you want the full collection of Japanese household secrets, remember to check the Japanese Method book, a guide for all of the money-saving methods the Japanese have used for centuries to keep their land, home, and family in good shape. It is at thejapanesemethod.com. Scan the QR code or click the link below to get your copy, and let me know in the comments once you get it. Next week, we are covering the Japanese method for keeping all pests out of the kitchen in your yard, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. Till next time.